This podcast is made possible by the listener members of Nashville Public Radio.
This is the Nash Villager Podcast. It's October 24th, 2024. On this day in 1801, a treaty between the Chickasaw Nation and the United States allowed the U.S. to create a wagon road through Chickasaw territory. The road was completed in 1802, and today, the Natchez Trace Parkway stretches 444 miles from Nashville way on down to Natchez, Mississippi. I'm Miriam Kramer, in for Nina Cardona, and this is your daily digest of what's happening around Middle Tennessee, plus history and context, from WPLN News. What we know as the modern Natchez Trace Parkway was completed in 2005. If you were to drive the whole thing, it would take you more than 11 hours, passing through 3 states and highlighting some pretty incredible southern landscapes. You would see forests, prairies, rivers, wetlands. And because it's an old route that's managed by the National Park Service, you'll also get a fair dose of history along your way from Tennessee to Mississippi. There are old inns that travelers used from the 1790s to the 1840s, and 6 sacred mounds that span centuries. And look, I'm sure that driving the trace is pretty wonderful, but have you ever considered biking it? The Parkway is a popular bike route, and people literally bike pack. Yes, that's a mix of biking and backpacking. The entire thing. There are bike-only campgrounds and a whole guide to biking the trace provided by the National Park Service. Now, I've never biked the whole thing, but the trace holds some pretty special memories for me as a Nashvilleian. I sent my parents there a few months ago to try to catch a glimpse of the Northern Lights. They didn't have any luck, but they did find a beautiful dark sky out there. And a few years back, and more than 220 years after it was established, my husband and I spent a couple magical hours riding our bikes down to Leaper's Fork. Hit up the Redbird coffee shop if you ever find yourself out that way. We often refer to that ride as our best ever, and we're planning to do it again soon. In just a few minutes, we'll hear from a bus rider who shares what transit improvements could mean for him and other users. That's coming up after the newscast.
WPLN's listener members care deeply about the local stories we report. You notice the little things and hold us to high standards. That's fair. You want every dollar you give to matter. So why do you give? One thing members say often is that our coverage is unbiased. That's what Bob in Jolton, Betty in Pulaski, and Paige in Dixon all cited when they gave. We're glad they noticed, and we hope that you will join them with your own contribution. Give today at WPLN.org/give. For WPLN News in Nashville, I'm Tony Gonzalez. 2 bridges on the Nolichucky River that were destroyed by recent floods may be replaced by summer. Bridge reconstructions like these can take as long as 8 years. But according to Tennessee's Transportation Department, a new state law is speeding up the process. The law allows for the use of a special type of contract that allows design, permitting, and pre-construction to happen at the same time. This could help with future climate-fueled disaster recoveries. The remnants of Hurricane Helene damaged many roads and infrastructure last month. The Knoxville News-Sentinel reported that those damages may increase traffic in the area for up to a year. The 2 destroyed bridges getting quick fixes are in Greene and Washington counties. Meanwhile, U.S. Congress members have written a letter to their colleagues urging swift passage of an appropriations bill to help farmers impacted by the hurricane. Tennesseans affected by the storm and flooding can get federal funding for repairs, food, and other basic needs, but the state's congressional delegation says farmers need additional money after floodwaters damaged their fields. Other states affected by the storm, including Virginia and North Carolina, have secured federal money for farmers, but Tennessee has not. And after that hurricane's devastation, numerous musicians signed on to play benefit shows. Senior music writer Julie Height reports that the newly announced Biscuits and Banjos Festival will combine fundraising with a landmark celebration.
The festival, planned for late April in Durham, North Carolina, will donate part of its proceeds to hurricane recovery efforts. But its greatest contributions will be cultural. Organized by Rhiannon Giddens, the renowned performer who previously had a home in Nashville, the event will spotlight a movement that's done much to reclaim the Black roots of folk, country, and string band music over the last quarter century. The festival harkens back to the Black Banjo Gathering, which introduced Giddens to other young Black string band musicians in 2005. They formed the band Carolina Chocolate Drops and drew attention to their predecessors while inspiring a new generation.
The lineup will reflect how that lineage continues to grow. Nashville is a step closer to having a National Women's Soccer League team. Sports agent Lonnie Murray has been drumming up support from a group of investors looking to make Music City home to its first professional women's league. Murray posted on social media that representation matters in Nashville and asked for prayers and support in the endeavor. Nashville is also one of a few cities being considered for a women's basketball team. Its soccer prospects may be more likely since Nashville already has a Major League Soccer stadium, but the WNBA is looking to expand with more teams, which raises Nashville's odds of being chosen. Abortion rights supporters in Tennessee say a recent court ruling is a victory, but a small one. WPLN's health reporter Catherine Sweeney tells us the ruling will protect emergency abortions in very limited situations.
A state court agreed with patients and doctors who argued the ban's medical exceptions are too vague. The order laid out specific medical conditions where doctors are allowed to perform the procedure, like when the water breaks before viability. But all of the conditions hinge on fatal fetal diagnoses, which means the fetus wouldn't survive past birth anyway. Ashley Caulfield, the president of Tennessee's Planned Parenthood chapter, explained that past patients needed abortions when the fetus was healthy, but they had life-threatening heart disease or cancer.
Those kinds of medical emergencies are not named in the lawsuit. Issues that people face are so complicated that they cannot be legislated or named by a judge.
The court order says doctors can't lose their medical licenses, but that the court doesn't have the right power to keep them from going to jail. It's a temporary order, so it's unclear how long the protection will last. Catherine Sweeney, WPLN News.
The long-awaited transformation of Fort Negley is moving forward. Construction for Phase 1 of the revitalization is set to begin this spring and will last around 12 to 18 months. The Metro Council allocated $17 million for the effort this year. Plans shared in a Nashville Banner report reveals there will be extensive rebuilding of the walking areas, new interpretive elements about the history of the fort and surrounding areas, a new parking lot, and a new memorial lawn dedicated to those who lost their lives building the fort. It was constructed in 1862 by 2,700 free and enslaved African-American laborers. Only a fraction of them were paid for their work. Fort Negley was the largest Union fort and the first U.S. location to be designated by UNESCO as a site of memory. This is just Phase 1. Architects anticipate the project taking at least 2 phases, if not 3. And a new historical plaque will be unveiled this weekend in downtown Murfreesboro. The African American Heritage Society of Rutherford County is behind the effort. The group is marking its 10th year of preserving history. The marker will remember the once thriving black business district known as Mink Slide at the corners of South Maple and Vine Streets. The unveiling is at 2 p.m. on Sunday. You can find more news anytime at WPLN.org. If Nashville voters approve the city's transit referendum, there would be an impact on all residents. For some, it would mostly mean a slightly higher sales tax on what they buy. For others, it could drastically alter how they get around. This week on the podcast, WPLN's Cynthia Abrams is bringing us stories straight from the bus. And today we hear from an outspoken rider who is thinking about what transit improvements could mean for him and his fellow users.
John Bull hasn't driven since 2019. Instead, the 77-year-old relies almost entirely on the bus system to get around.
I'll typically ride Route 52. I rode it 6 times yesterday.
His day starts before the sun even rises, with a bus ride to a nearby park for his morning run. Depending on the day, he might ride to get groceries, attend Metro Council meetings, or see a movie at the Bell Court.
12 transfers are not unusual for me. and I've gone as high as 14 in one day.
John is such a prolific rider that there's a blurb about him in the official referendum document. He's optimistic about the plan, which he says would be a big deal for him. Even though he rides all day, there are some trips that just don't exist right now.
If the buses ran later, I would be able to see the midnight movies and ride the bus home.
Currently, even the most frequent routes don't run between 1 and 4 a.m. The referendum would increase 14 routes to 24/7. On his rides, John is seeing how impactful this would be, especially for workers.
I was at Coleman Park waiting to go inbound on a Sunday, and here's this gal who had been working some night shift. She had been waiting 2 hours for the bus because it's not running 24/7. Well, we need to do better. We need to do better.
For years, he's dedicated much of his time to homelessness outreach, bringing basic necessities and Narcan to people who need it. Many also depend on the bus. As we wait for our bus along Nolensville Pike, we're approached by a woman, Renee.
Nice to meet you, John.
Who shares what's on her mind.
What about street lives? There's so many people out here on the streets. I mean, I have to watch it firsthand because my son's going through it. It's a sad thing.
It's why a big part of John's outreach also includes handing out bus passes, because he knows there's not enough housing.
If you're not going to be able to provide even transitional housing, you've got to have the bus passes. You got to get them people out of the rain or out of the cold.
The transit plan would offer free fares for low-income earners. So while John is pulling for a transit system that would allow him to catch his midnight movie at the Belcourt, he's also hoping for one that would help those who need it even more than him. Cynthia Abrams, WPLN News.
For more of our coverage of the city's transit referendum, head to WPLN.org/transit. We do this roundup of Nashville news every weekday, so subscribe in your favorite podcasting app to make sure you never miss an episode. And if you like this, you'll probably enjoy the Nashvillager newsletter too. You'll get perspective from more of my colleagues at Nashville Public Radio and links to the stories that we're following. You can sign up for those daily emails at WPLN.org/Nashvillager. And that's it for today. Thanks so much for listening.